Hello, dear viewers. Namaskar. Welcome to Moksha Media. You are with Moksha Hiremat. Most of you have heard the poem Tirukula Vinasya Pralapa. That is the lamentation of Tirukula Vinasi, which is very heart-touching. But we don't know, most of the people don't know that the poet who has written it, of course, ShaDaksharadeva was the poet who wrote about that Tirukula Vinasi. In your student life, in one way or another way, you read the fate of Tirukula Vinasi and her son. ShaDaksharadeva wrote of it in his Rajashekara Vilasa. ShaDaksharadeva was one of the prominent poets in the history of Kannada literature. He was an erudite scholar. Professor S.S. Baswanal opined that ShaDaksharadeva stood on par with Pampa, Ranna, Harihara, Raghavanka, Lakshmisha, Kumararasa, Shamarasa, and etc. He stood on par with them in his poetic skills and erudite scholarity and the potential, his potential poetic abilities. It shows to what extent that ShaDaksharadeva played a prominent role in the history of Kannada literature. ShaDaksharadeva was a scholar both in Kannada and in Sanskrit language and literature. He penned some works, but most of them are very famous even today. ShaDaksharadeva was lived in 1655 of Common Era. He was born and bred in Danaguru, a village in the Taluka of Malavalli, in the district of Mandya, Karnataka and India. We don't have information regarding his parents because he was an ascetic. He learned in Elanduru under the guidance of Chikkavira Deshikendra of Danaguru Bhatt, who was a disciple of Revana Siddha. So, ShaDaksharadeva belonged to the Guru Parampare, that is the Guru tradition. And later on, he became the head of Danaguru Math and Elanduru Math. Even today we can see his memorial tomb in Elanduru. Being an ascetic, he had not mentioned anywhere about his family about his relatives, because since boyhood he was an ascetic as per the tradition of the Veerashaivism. Usually, when a boy becomes an ascetic, when he accepts Diksha from his Guru in Veerashaivism, automatically he has to sacrifice everything, even his parents and relatives. So, in one way or another way, he could not belong to parents. That is the tradition. Biologically, he might be, one might be, but not psychologically and not in other things. He was devoted to the society, he was devoted to the following the Veerashaivism onwards. So, ShaDaksharadeva did not mention the name of his parents and relatives anywhere. But he was an erudite scholar. Professor Basunal opined that he stood on par with Pampa, Ranna, Hariyara, Raghavanka, Chamarasa, Kumaravyasa and others. I have already told you. It shows to what extent he was scholastic, to what extent he was poetic. As he was a scholar in both the languages, that is Kannada and Sanskrit, he penned his works in both the languages. His works are ರಾಜಶೇಖರ ವಿಲಾಸ, ಋಷಭೇಂದ್ರ ವಿಜಯ, ಶಬರಶಂಕರ ವಿಲಾಸ, ಬಸವಾಷ್ಟಕ, ನೀಲಾಂಬಿಕಾ ಸ್ತೋತ್ರ, ಮಹಾ ಮಂಗಳಾಷ್ಟಕ, ಲಿಂಗಾಷ್ಟಕ. All these works are in Kannada language. And Shivastotra Manjari, Veerabhadra Dandaka, Shivastava Manjari and Kavikarna Rasalyana works are in Sanskrit language. These works generally based on Shiva devotees of Tamil Nadu, especially 63 pioneers of Shiva Sharanas of Veerashaivism. Rajashekara Vilasa is his magnum opus. It is a fantastic and imaginative work. There we come across the character of Tirukula Vinasi and her lamentation regarding the death of her only son. The story goes like this. There was a king. His name was Satyendra. He had a son by name Rajashekara, and he had a good ministers, and one of his minister's son was the friend of Rajashekara. That minister's son was Mitavachana. One day, Rajashekara, the prince of Satyendra, along with his minister's son Mitavachana and others, went on a pleasure trip on a horse ride. As they were routing in the royal street of the kingdom, unfortunately, their horses were trampled on a boy. The boy was dead there only. That boy was the son of Tirukula Vinasi. Tirukalavinasi lamented so much. Her lamentation knew no bounds because she had the only son. And that son was no more. It is common to any mother who is in such a situation. And Tirukalavinasi is not an exception to this. She lamented on and on. Then she went to the king and asked for the justice. Because Satyendra was known for his justice. He allowed everyone to have justice in his land. He followed the law of the land. Tirukalavinasi so went and asked Satyendra for justice. Satyendra asked what was the problem. Tirukalavinasi explained it. And king came to know that his son was responsible for the death of Tirukalavinasi's son. He did not know what to do. His own son trampled on and killed Tirukalavinasi's son. If it would be others, the case would have been different. But it was belonged to his own son. Being a king by name Satyendra, he had to obey the law of the land. Many times he declared that everyone was equal in the eyes of law. Now it was inevitable to him. He was in dilemma what to do and what not to do. After much of dilemma, he stood for the justice. And then he ordered for the execution of his son Rajashekara and minister's son Mitavachana and others. It was very pathetic, being a king of the land, being ordered to execute his own son is not that much of easy as we think. If you look at our ministers, if you look at our politicians nowadays, and some celebrities, and some persons in the name of religions, we know what happened, what is not happened. What happened, what not to be happened. That is the situation. But Satyendra, being a different one, he ordered for the execution of his son and others. He ordered to cut off the heads of those fellows. Rajashekara, the prince, the son of Satyendra, the king, and Mitavachana, the son of minister, heard of it. They did not know what to do. They knew what they did was not justifiable. What they did was wrong. They committed a blunder in their lives. For that blunder they had to face the problem, they had to face the punishment. So they decided, Rajashekara decided, and he cut off his head and removed head from the shoulder. The cut off head was fallen to the ground. Then minister's son Mitavachana also cut off his head, and it was also fallen to the ground. And others also, hearing this, seeing this, witnessing this, cut off their heads. They removed those heads from their shoulders. All those heads, cut off heads, were fallen on the ground. But they were simply not fallen on the ground, Those cut off heads fallen on the ground chanted Panchakshari Shiva mantra, Shiva Panchakshari mantra. They chanted Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya. The chant went on and on for some time. And being a worthy son of his father, that Rajashekara did it. Being worthy son of that minister, that Michavachana and others did it. Everyone went on and on uttering, chanting the Shiva Panchakshari mantra, Namah Shivaya. At last, Shiva appeared before them and he took them all to Kailasa. There the story ends. It is a very fantastic story, you know. We should appreciate the concept of justice of Satyendra. According to his law of land, everyone is equal before law. So you compare the concept of and execution of Satyendra with our nowadays persons, politicians, celebrities and so many heads of this and that, we come to know where we are. If you compare the concept of justice of Satyendra, are we doing justice to our happenings in this land and etc.? The answer is no. The answer should be yes, but here it is no. So, in the eyes of the common people, Satyendra becomes a great one, becomes a good celebrity, and becomes a real religious person, but not others who killed people in the name of religion and etc. etc. There we have to appreciate the concept of Satyendra. If everyone understands and adapts an iota of Satyendra's concept of justice, definitely there would be no problems. Most of the problems would be solved. And our course would be lightened, would be minimized with burden. And the persons in the seats of justice could lighten their heart and mind, and they could lead the life of happiness without tension. But you see, my dears, it has not happened here. That is the problem. So, that Rajashekara Vilasa shows all these things, that ShaDaksharadeva shows all these things in his work Rajashekara Vilasa. He narrates the story in such a way it touches our heart and mind. So, here we have to know what is that justice, what is that concept of justice. So, like this, it goes on and on. Of course, he also maintained the poetic justice in his other works. In Basavaraja Vijaya or Rishavendra Vijaya, that it is the compendium of 80 Shivasharanas in the form of biographical sketches. Of course, it has 42 sections containing more than 3,500 poems. So, like this, that ShaDaksharadeva goes on and on explaining, narrating the concept of justice and the importance of spirituality in his works. So, being a ascetic, he maintains such a sort of humanity, everyone should be appreciated it. Sometimes we say, one who doesn't have an experience could not do it properly. But in case of ShaDaksharadeva, even he was an ascetic, he was a yogi, he was a rishi, he was a head of a mutt, but he maintained the concept of justice, he maintained the model, he maintained the happiness of the society, and he maintained how a person could become a spiritual one. That is the greatness of ShaDaksharadeva. So even today that Rajashekara Vilasa is appreciated. So many scholars commented on it, not only in Kannada, in Sanskrit language also. Because in those days, it was a tradition. Whatever is written in other dialects, it should be brought out in classical language. They thought that everyone is a classical language. That would be a different concept, that would be a different understanding. But in those days, that was the concept. That is why whatever one wanted to propound, and he had to do it in Sanskrit language also. So many works at that time were translated into English, even so many Upanishads. I have already told it in the episodes of Upanishads. So many Upanishads have been translated into Arabic, Urdu, and so many other languages in the world. Kannada is not an exception to this. So all these things say to us the importance of justice. If everyone follows justice properly, we could minimize so many problems in a society. We can solve so many problems and could lead a life of happiness. That is what ShaDaksharadeva shows in all his works. So here we come to know his imagination, his artful skills, poetic artful skills, his potentiality of poetry, and etc. etc. That is why ShaDaksharadeva could become a role model for his concepts, for his behaviors, and for so many other things. If you want to make our society a beautiful one, automatically poets, ascetics like ShaDaksharadeva could become models, and we should take them as models. Not question of would and could. If you take them as our models, definitely so many problems in the society would be solved. That is what I tried my best to bring the truth to you. Subscribe and share it, and see you in the next episode. Thank you. Namaskar.